afternoon, and thank you for joining us for History Happens Here, the story of the History Center. I'm Katie Kelly, and I'm the Curator of Education here at the History Center. I'd like to welcome everyone joining us in person, and then also everyone joining us on the live webinar. If anyone has any questions, we'll make sure to save some time for that at the end of the program. And for those of you who are on the webinar, if you have questions, just put those in the chat, and Cheyenne will relay those to us. Today's program is being presented by our Museology Committee. So this is a new committee that we've started this year. And our purpose is that we get together and we discuss and implement initiatives on best practices in the museum and history field. To do that, we not only implement some things here at the History Center, like a monthly book club, or a quarterly book club, where we discuss topics in the museum field, but we also are trying to create connections and work with our other cultural partners through our Museology Committee. Essentially, at its heart, the Museology Committee seeks to further the mission of the History Center and promote the work that we're doing here. With one of our first ever Lunch and Learn programs several years ago, we did a program like the one we're doing today, which was kind of an introduction to the History Center and a little bit about the work we do and how we do that work. But a lot changes at our organization and in the field in general, and a lot has changed in the preceding years, the post-seeding years, or whatever. So this keeps giving me some feedback. So we thought that it would actually be a great opportunity for us to do an updated version, an updated program, especially for our Lunch and Learn audience. Many of you that are in the audience today are some of our most dedicated and involved program attendees. Many of you in this room come over and over every month and come to a lot of our programming. And so we thought it'd be another great opportunity to sort of present some of this information to you all. So some of my colleagues in the room may have also experienced this. I find when I tell people that I work at a museum that they think that that is one of two jobs. They either picture someone maybe behind the scenes back in a lab, dusting off a fossil or restoring a piece of artwork, or they think of a blue-vested docent wrangling a school group around the building. We do both of those things, but we also do a lot more than that. One of these pictures up here I'd like to point out is one of our collection staff grooming a taxidermy bear named Mabel that lives in our collection. So it's a pretty, they do some variety of things there for sure. The History Center is an American Alliance of Museums accredited institution and a Smithsonian affiliate. We've been honored with the top 5 national awards a museum can earn in just the last 5 years. This includes the Institute of Museum and Library Services National Medal and the American Association of State and Local History's Leadership in History and Merit Awards. Located in the heart of downtown Orlando, we serve patrons who are local, regional, and international tourists as well as domestic tourists. We offer immensely valuable opportunities for engagement, education, and enrichment to the public. We love history here, so of course for today's presentation, we're going to share some about our museum's historic home, the 1927 Courthouse that we're currently in, and then we're also going to share we're going to trace the history of our organization. And then we will each share some information about what each of our curatorial departments do to share Central Florida's history. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our collections manager, Emily Coughlin, who will get us started with the story of who we were and who we have been before we move forward to the story of who we are and who we hope to be in the future.
All right. Hello. So as Katie said, I'm Emily. I'm the collections manager. Can everyone still hear me? Okay, sorry. I'm the shortest presenter, so. So a little bit about the building that we are sitting in today. Originally, this was the 1927 Courthouse. It got that name because it opened in 1927. It was Designed by Murray S. King, who was Florida's first registered architect. Unfortunately, he passed away in 1925 before construction even began, and the courthouse was overseen and essentially finished by his son, James King. It's a neoclassical building, which, as we all know from government buildings, this is the style that we are used to. It kind of became a symbol of authority and power seat for government. It's 5 stories tall. It has a steel frame with reinforced concrete. They actually encased the steel frame with gypsum because if there were to be a fire, the steel will get really, really hot and it collapse, where the gypsum is incombustible. So at this time, everyone was all about fireproof buildings. So they tried to make this one fireproof as well. The exterior is clad in Indiana limestone. And at the time that it was built, it was nicknamed the $1 Million Courthouse because it cost $1 million to construct. And it actually stands smack dab in the center of Orlando. When the city was incorporated, they went from what was known as Courthouse Square, where we are, and it was a mile north, south, east, west, and that's where they built the courthouse. One of the cool things that we have in our collection is the blueprints for the original courthouse. So originally it had 2 courtrooms. They're named Courtroom A and Courtroom B. One was for later converted to criminal court, and then the entire 5th floor was a prison. So this building was also the county jail. If you know anything about the staff here, one of the a couple of departments are on the 5th floor, so my office particularly is the size of a literal jail cell, so it's kind of like, I'm told the bars are gone. I don't believe it, but I'm told they're gone. One of the things that we brought some artifacts from our offsite storage. This is actually a key from the jails. This would open the jail cells on the 5th floor when this was actually a jail, from 1927 until they built the Annex, which we'll get to. One of the interesting features of this building was that each courtroom had its own mural. So one of the murals, which is the bottom picture, is by William de Leftwich Dodge. He was an American artist who was prominent. He did murals for the Columbian Exposition of 1893, the Library of Congress, and the Brooklyn Academy of Music. His mural is titled Allegory of Truth and Mercy, with Lycurgus, lawgiver of Sparta, and you can see that picture here. And it's really just truth and mercy, and truth is imploring compassion from Lycurgus, who's reading his decree. This mural you can still see in the courtroom on the 3rd floor. So if you go down, up there, you can see this one. And actually, we can't bring the murals in here, so we brought by Vincent Adoronte, who was an Italian painter. It was titled Justice, Mercy, Wisdom, and Power. And you see the figures kind of around the center, and these were behind the judge's bench, so they just exuded power behind a powerful person. And in the center is essentially the decree of law, which he chose to put in the 10 Commandments, so it was the Judeo-Christian law. Unfortunately, that courtroom is no longer there. It's now a gallery. But Rachel will get into that. Eventually, it was kind of realized the 1927 courthouse was way too small for what we needed. So the county decided, let's build another building. So what is now Heritage Square, did the mic go out? No? Okay. Sorry. It sounded like I got quieter, sorry. What is now Heritage Square used to be where the Annex was, and that was an additional building. It was designed by James King, Murray King's son, and another architect, Ralph Lovelock. And it was the late 1950s. It was considered the modern courthouse. As you can see, it was aquamarine, so it did not fit in downtown Orlando. Everyone made fun of it because it looked like it belonged in Miami and not in Orlando. But it was an extension of our courthouse. And I actually have a couple pieces from it. So this is one of the tiles that was from the lower level. It was kind of a decoration on the building. You also see these outside our building. These were made in pre-Castro, Cuba. And then this is a piece of the west entrance of the annex. Surprisingly, we have a lot of pieces from the annex, considering that the building had to be demolished because of asbestos. These are safe, don't worry. So when you think about the courthouse and Orlando in general, a lot of prominent cases took place here, but they didn't happen in this building. They happened in the annex. These go to include the first conviction ever gotten with the use of DNA evidence. Ted Bundy was tried in the annex for the murder of his youngest victim, Kimberly Leach. The picture on the screen you can see in our courtroom upstairs, we don't know who did it, but somebody carved Ted Bundy into one of the tables. So that is a rumor that Ted Bundy actually sat there and did that because he was bored, but he was never in this building as far as we can tell, because the 4th floor of the annex, which connected to our 5th floor, was an extension of the jail. So they wouldn't have even had to bring him over here for holding. The saddest thing that probably happened in that building was January 10th, 1984. A man that was on trial went on a shooting rampage, and he killed 1 officer and injured 2 others in the process. So he went from a misdemeanor crime to a felony. As I said, it was destroyed because of asbestos. We have a picture of the demolition here. So all of our buildings have time capsules. Let me move these. This is not from this building. The 1927 one is still in the cornerstone of this building. This is from the Annex time capsule. So in the mid-60s, mid-70s, they built a tower because they needed more space between the 2 buildings. So they were kind of connected by a bridge. They built, it kind of looked like a slab of concrete between the 2. And to do that, they had to remove the cornerstone. So in turn, that removed the time capsule. It still has not been opened. It's not supposed to be opened until 2059 because it was placed in 1959. And it was actually given to the director of finance. They just kind of handed it to him, and he kept it in his office until he donated it to the History Center in 1976. When the annex was demolished in 98, the museum director was asked about the time capsule by a Sentinel reporter. She said, I don't think we have that. I hope it wasn't carted away with the rubble as they're hauling everything to the landfill. And she was like, we definitely don't have it. And then she was pressed about it, and she denied its existence altogether. So, of course, history museum staff started searching storage, and they found it. They said that their records were wrong. What ended up happening was the finance director gave it to us in 1976, and it just kind of, with moving buildings and everything, it just kind of got lost in storage. But it was x-rayed. This is it. And so we found it. Everything was good. But it was it was pretty touch and go there for a few minutes when no one knew what happened to it, and they thought it was just gone forever. So I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to take this away. I'm going to turn it over to our historian, Rachel Williams. She's going to tell you a little bit more about the history of the History Center and not just the building we're in.
Hi. Can everyone hear me? I'm the tallest presenting. So If you can't hear me, let me know. So my name is Rachel Williams. I'm the historian here at the History Center. And as Emily said, I'm going to be talking about the history of the History Center and the Historical Society here. So before the History Center and before the Historical Society, there was the Antiquarian Society. This was started in 1932 by sisters Alta and Eliza Wright. You can see Alta Wright in the left picture with posing with some of her antiques, likely in front of her house. The Antiquarian Society formed to discuss, preserve, and study antiques in the area. Now, a lot of the antiques that they collected weren't necessarily just from Orlando, but people donated them that were from Orlando, if that makes sense. So there were also items that were out of scope, as we say. Most of the people in the Antiquarian Society were women and were second and third generation natives from Orlando. In 1942, the Antiquarian Society set up an exhibit in the old 1892 courthouse, which is pictured here. This courthouse was located on what is now Heritage Park, so the big park in front of this building. They set up this exhibit in the hopes that it would help to keep the old courthouse around, because around 1941, 1942, there were talks about the 1892 courthouse being demolished. So they thought that setting up this exhibit showcasing Orlando history would help to keep the courthouse around, which it did, at least for a little bit. Also fun to note, the small exhibit that was set up, it showcased a pioneer kitchen. It was only open for 3 hours from 2 to 5 p.m. on Fridays, so very short span of time to see it. So, like I said, the 1892 courthouse was only saved for so long. In 1957, the courthouse was demolished, so we could make way for the Annex. So during that time, the Orange County Board of Commissioners wanted to set up a historical commission because they wanted to keep going with the mission to preserve the history of Orlando. So they put Judge John Chaney, which can be seen here on the left, in charge as the chairman of the Historical Commission. Also to note, the commission is separate from the Historical Society. I know this is confusing. I was very confused when reading old newspapers doing this research because they kind of use commission and society interchangeably, but the society creation is coming later. Bear with me. So in 1963, the museum exhibit kind of came back in the Annex building. It was on the top floor of the Annex building, and it was right next to the employee lounge. And because of that, apparently a lot of people didn't know it was there. There were reports that very little people came by, probably because of its location and maybe marketing at the time in the early 60s. Again, the museum was only open from 2 to 5 p.m., this time on Tuesdays, but they expanded that in 1965 to Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, but still only 3 hours. Oh, and in 1969, there was a restructuring of space within the Annex. So the museum got kicked out of their space because they had to make room for the sheriff's department. So the museum had to find a new space yet again, which they found in 1970 in the Christ building, which is located basically right across the street, or was located, and that can be seen in the picture on the left. Everything in the collection at the time was moved to this building except for the courthouse bell, the 1892 courthouse bell. That was kept in the Annex because it was believed that it was so heavy that it would fall through the floor because it was on the second floor of the Christ building. So they wanted to avoid that, so they left it in the Annex. And we still have this as well. So also at this time in 1970 is when talks began about finding a permanent, dedicated space for a historical museum for Orlando. At which point, in 1971, Donald Cheney, the Historical Commission chairman, created the Orange County Historical Society. And this was to raise money, was created to raise money for a dedicated permanent museum. And it was also decided in 1871 that this dedicated space would be located in Lock Haven Park. So the museum came to fruition in 1976. That's when it opened officially. Now the museum would be open Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. At the time, admission was free, so this whole time the admission was free, but donations were always appreciated, and there were memberships available starting at this time for $5. In the beginning, so when the museum was located in the Chris Museum, or the Chris Building, Donald Cheney served as director and curator, but when the museum opened in Lock Haven Park, Gene Yothers took over as director and curator until 1896, when Sarah Van Arsdale became director and curator. In 1981, the Historical Museum became officially part of Orange County government under the Parks Department. We're no longer part of the Parks Department. That changed as of 1995. And in 1984, the Orange County Historical Commission was abolished because it was too confusing and was essentially considered a duplicate of the Historical Society. So everything just became under the Historical Society and Orange County government. So as Emily just talked about a little bit, in 1989, asbestos was found in the Courthouse Annex building. So it was decided that a new courthouse would be built, the annex would be demolished, leaving the 1927 courthouse empty. So the Orange County Board of Commissioners appointed a task force to figure out a reuse project for the 1927 courthouse due to its historical significance. In 1991, the Board of Commissioners endorsed a recommendation that the 1927 courthouse be used as the new site, again, of the Historical Museum. So, also fun fact, when they found asbestos in the annex, they used space in the Angevit building, also kind of across the street, for makeshift courtrooms. In 1994, construction started on the new courthouse, which then was completed in 1997, which then launched the renovations to begin in the 1927 courthouse to be used as the museum. And then in 1998, the courthouse annex was demolished, which you can see by these cool pictures here. And also, as Emily discussed or touched on, in July of 1999, there was a fire in Courtroom B. This fire was started accidentally just during renovations. Newspapers reported that it was caused by the removal of a conduit with a cutting torch when a flame ignited through an electrical junction box. I'm not an electrician, so I don't know what all of that means. But apparently, the flame shot through this electrical junction box and caught fire with a plastic tarp that was covering some of the furniture in the courtroom to protect it from dust and debris during renovations. So the dust and everything that was on the tarp kind of ignited and rapidly torched this courtroom, which destroyed the judge's desk, the witness stand, and the courtroom reporter's desk as well, and destroyed the mural. And as you can see by the photo on the left, it also completely stained the ceiling with smoke. Apparently this fire only lasted 10 minutes, but it did a lot of damage in those 10 minutes. And then on this photo, you can see in the woman doing this, like what just happened with this fire, that is the director and curator, Sarah Van Arsdale. And then this is just a side-by-side picture of after the fire and before the fire. So the mural was completely destroyed. So luckily, because Courtroom A and Courtroom B were essentially a mirror image of each other, we took the furniture from Courtroom A, put it in Courtroom B, and replaced the mural. So the mural that's currently in Courtroom B was in Courtroom A. And now Courtroom A is a gallery, like Emily said as well. So finally, after the fire, on September 29th, 2000, the Orange County Regional History Center has its grand opening ceremony, which included a ribbon-cutting ceremony and speeches from prominent Orlando figures such as Glenda Hood, Mel Martinez, and Mary Johnson, who can be seen there with Sarah Van Arsdale in the ribbon-cutting ceremony. And also, just to kind of a little bit continue the timeline, in 2006 is when, as Katie mentioned, we received our accreditation from the American Alliance of Museums and became a Smithsonian affiliate museum. And part of what makes all of our accreditations and recognition and awards possible is our wonderful exhibits, which Lauren's going to talk about.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? All right. My name is Lauren McLeavy, and I am the Exhibits Associate here at the History Center. My role essentially consists of assisting our technical lead, Paul Tremblay, and our graphic designer, Cindy Marathew, in the research, writing, design, and fabrication of exhibits. So I'm kind of a catch-all, maybe a little bit of a lackey. It's okay. Just to preface, this is my very first Lunch and Learn presentation, and I'm a little under the weather, so please bear with me through any long pauses or stumbling over words, and I promise we'll get through this together. Just please let me know if I go too quiet, because I tend to do that. For my section of today's talk, I'll be taking you through some of our most noteworthy past exhibits, our current goings-on, and a little of what we envision for the future. So beginning with Blastoff in 2001, so this was kind of the first really big exhibit after our opening. This was one of our first exhibits that really took off, pun intended, with the public. Blastoff looked back over 1,000 years of humanity's fascination with the sky and what lies beyond it. The exhibit explored early myths about space, science fiction's influence on space exploration technologies, and of course, actual space travel. A life-size replica was created for the exhibit of the Mercury capsule that astronaut Alan Shepard piloted in 1961, becoming the second human and first American to enter outer space. You can see that in the lower right here. And that same capsule is the very one that you can now sit on the first floor. So if anyone sat in there, you know how small it is. One of the original 7 Mercury astronauts, Scott Carpenter, actually came to the exhibit and to see it in the replica capsule. And apparently a man of few words, he said of the exhibit, "Great exhibit." Next, we have Jim Henson's Fantastic World in 2009. Did anyone here get to come see this? No? No one? I'm surprised. This is actually maybe, hands. Nice. Because this was maybe one of our most popular exhibits we've ever had. It followed Jim Henson's career from his start in puppeteering through the creation of the Muppets. The exhibit included puppets like Wilkins and Wontkins, which Jim created in the 1960s for the DC company Wilkins Coffee, as well as some of the classic Muppet favorites like Kermit, pictured down here. Fun fact from the gallery guide for this exhibit, the first Kermit puppet was actually made by Jim in 1955 from his mom's old spring coat and a ping pong ball. Didn't say if he got permission to cut up her coat or not. Not sure. This was not an exhibit that we at History Center created, but a traveling exhibit. So basically an exhibit created by another museum, packaged up with all its items and assets, and to be displayed at other museums around the country or even around the world. But like with every traveling exhibit that we bring into our museum, we added a Central Florida a tie into our Central Florida community. So in this case, the exhibit also featured the people and puppets of the City of Orlando Puppet Troupe, a group of puppeteers, now unfortunately dissolved, who would put on original theater shows with their creations and also taught puppetry classes for children at the Lake Eola Charter School. You can see in the upper right, those are some of the puppets that were featured in their shows. The dragon especially was apparently a fan favorite. Also discussed in the exhibit were the Central Florida Puppet Guild, the Orlando Puppet Festival, and Jim Henson's own Florida home. Next, in 2016, we had Pride, Prejudice, and Protest. The intro text of this exhibit begins, "This is the story of Central Florida's gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and queer community, as told by the historians and record keepers of the GLBT History Museum of Central Florida." So this exhibition was a collaboration between the now called the LGBT History Museum, which is a primarily online institution, although they do have a collection housed at UCF, and the Orange County Regional History Center. This exhibition was extensive. It covered all of where Figurehead is now. I think it may have even extended in here at a certain point. And it followed acts of discrimination, acts of protest, and acts of joy in the LGBTQ community from the 1950s to present day. Some highlights from this exhibition were we displayed a purple pamphlet from 1964, and this was a state-sponsored report warning against the dangers of homosexuality that actually ended up banned because it contained graphic photographs of homosexual acts. A little bit of a backfire. The exhibit also included the details about the opening of Parliament House in 1975, which was termed by owners Bill Miller and Mike Hodge, who bought and converted the building on North Orange Blossom Trail, as the world's largest gay entertainment complex. Unfortunately, Parliament House is no longer open, but I think there are whispers about it opening again. The exhibit also included the effects of the AIDS epidemic in Central Florida and photographs of Orlando's first Pride Parade in 1991. But again, this is just a small sampling. This exhibit was, as I said, extensive. The exhibit presented unique challenges in a different way from the next and final exhibit I'll be discussing. It was unique because while the exhibit was in development, in fact, nearly completed, on June 12, 2016, a devastating tragedy rocked the Orlando LGBTQ community, the Pulse nightclub mass shooting, in which 53 people were injured and 49 lives were taken in an act of senseless hate. A section was added to the exhibit with the intention of honoring the victims and survivors of the shooting. This section highlighted the outpouring of support from around the globe and right here in Orlando for survivors, families of survivors and victims, and the Orlando LGBTQ community at large, and included mementos and letters left at some of the many public memorials that sprung up after the tragedy. Finally, and most recently, we have Yesterday This Was Home, the Ocoee Massacre of 1920 from 2020. This exhibit centered on the Ocoee Massacre of 1920, an event where a mob of white townspeople from Ocoee and the surrounding area gathered to violently prevent Black Ocoeans from exercising their right to vote in the presidential election. Many Black people were killed, and hundreds more fled the town as the mob burned home after home. This exhibit had two parts. The first gave an overview of the history of Black people in Florida, from the free Africans who landed here with Ponce de Leon in 1513, through the U.S. acquisition of Florida, the Civil War, up to the 1920s, the time of the massacre. This section also highlighted crucial historical figures like activist and co-founder of the NAACP, Ida B. Wells Barnett, and provided historical context by explaining the conditions that ultimately led to the Ocoee Massacre. These included details about the founding of the KKK, laws created to suppress Black people's votes after they were finally granted that right, and more. The second part of the exhibit was focused on the history of the town of Ocoee leading up to 1920, the events of the massacre itself, and the lasting impact of the tragedy. This section had interactives like the land deed map, which essentially was a large touchscreen interactive that had a timeline going from the 1800s up to, I believe, 1980. And you could see how property ownership in Ocoee changed. Before the massacre, it was majority black property ownership in the town. And after, there's a stark shift to white ownership as black Ocoeans were run out of their homes. And as you can imagine, they weren't keen to return after the violence of what happened. This exhibit also presented a unique challenge, but in a different way from Pride, Prejudice, and Protest. The research alone took nearly 3 years, partly because of how many documents were burned during the massacre or later destroyed to cover up white townspeople's part in what happened, but also because this was History Center's very first pandemic project. So this means that development of the details for the physical exhibit had to happen online through Zoom calls and Dropbox as people were working at home. And production, fabrication of the elements like the cabin, which you can see a drawing of here by art director Pam Schwartz, had to be very much scheduled, very careful so as not to spread COVID. And it was very different for our staff because our exhibits are so often a very collaborative, in-person brainstorming process. This is another drawing. I wanted to show you guys kind of how ideation happens. This is how one might walk through the gallery. You can see the cabin in the middle. This was created to house the most sensitive photographs and information of the exhibit. And it's just a look behind the scenes about how exhibit staff think about where are things actually going to go, how might a guest move through. So presently, we have, for our exhibits presently, we have right now Figurehead on this floor, Music and Mayhem in Orlando's Underground, and this exhibit takes a look at the punk or alternative music scene in Orlando in the 1990s. Following specifically the Figurehead Company, which promoted shows, established performance venues, and released music through their own record label. The exhibit features shows that took place at the Sapphire Supper Club, music venue in the 90s, and the artists who rocked those shows. There's also a section highlighting several Central Florida concert poster artists, and there are over 90 different show posters in the whole exhibit. And after this, you can go in there and count them and tell me if I'm wrong. We also have, as I hope many of you have already played with, our new interactives in our Discovering a Paradise or First Peoples Gallery on the 4th floor, what we actually call 4 South, if you want a behind-the-scenes look. We have our Sinkhole Interactive, which shows different kinds of sinkholes and explains what makes our state so geologically prone to sinkholes. Our Timucua Language Interactive, where you can select different animals, plants, and objects to explore words from the language of the Timucua, one of the largest Central Florida Native American tribes pre-colonization. And our European Contact videos with the headphones, where you can view animations that cover over 300 years of battles and bloodshed as European countries battled over ownership of Florida at high cost to people like the Timucua who are already here. Okay, finally, I told you we'd get through it. In the future, we're looking toward the future, rather. We continue to make improvements to our permanent galleries, whether this comes in the form of new interactives, like what I've just discussed in 4 South, new and different objects and revamped spaces, or simply updated texts that further explores the diverse stories and history of Central Florida. We're focused on improving behind the scenes and out front, as you probably saw coming in. I apologize. One thing I can tell you is coming. Sorry, I got a little too excited, is a big change to the Disney part of what we call the tourism gallery on our 3rd floor. We are looking at expanding that section's coverage to finally include some non-Disney theme parks and attractions, both present and defunct. But there's much more than that in store, and I hope you all keep coming back to see how our museum changes and grows. Thank you. With that, I will hand it back to our collections manager, Emily Coughlin. Thanks, guys.
Hello again. Try not to get as close this time. So, as we've said a bunch of times, I'm the collections manager. And most of the work the collections department does is behind the scenes. We care for and preserve everything that you see in the museum, as well as the collection as a whole. So we collect from 7 counties. A lot of people don't always know that. We collect from Brevard, Lake, Orange, Osceola, Polk, Seminole, and Volusia. So we kind of have a little bit of everything. You can see in the pictures here a little behind the scenes look of what our storage looks like. We recently were able to acquire professional grade art storage. My background is art, so I was very excited to finally be able to hang all of our paintings. And then what the rest of our collection looks like for the artifacts, the textiles, everything like that. It's stored in archival boxes in an environmentally controlled space. We also have an example of how things are packed so they are properly cared for. Basically, the rule is if you can pick up the box and anything in it moves, you need to repack it. So this is a Civil War surgical kit that we've actually used. We try to do, which Katie will talk about with programming, but we try to pull things like this out so that the public can actually see it and sometimes put on gloves and handle the objects themselves. So the department itself is made up of a bunch of different people who work very closely together to kind of make everything happen. This includes myself. I am responsible for the preservation of our objects, photographs, postcards, and artwork. Our archivist, who handles all of our historical records and ephemera. Our curator, who kind of runs the department, supervises everyone, and makes sure we're all doing our jobs through daily research, processing, and the care of the collection. He also helps with a lot of the donor stuff that I have to do as well. We have an assistant curator who fosters relationships with both the community and other museum departments to highlight and add to the collection in innovative ways. And he is also the mastermind behind our figurehead exhibit. We have a digital archivist who handles all of our physical media, which we have a vast film collection that she is currently working on cataloging and digitizing so that we can make it accessible to the public. And she also handles all digital media, all the formats, and all of the digitizing equipment. So everything that goes from film reels to digital, she's the one that actually does that, and she knows how to fix all of the machines. And if she can't fix it, we're kind of in trouble. We have our historian, Rachel, who conducts a lot of research for social media, articles, presentations like this one, and does public information requests. You're not on Do Not Disturb. Heads up, sorry. And she also is our oral historian. So she's the one that goes out and meets with people that either she finds or other people find that have really interesting stories that we definitely want to preserve for the collection. And then we have our registrar, who coordinates all of our paperwork, keeps me in line, for all of our accessions, deaccessions. She handles all of our loans, all of our record keeping. She's kind of overhauling how we do our records. And she assists me with a lot of things at our storage warehouse. She's kind of like a collections manager part 2. I tease her about that because she basically does everything I do except for kind of decide what's actually being added to the collection, which sometimes we let her do. And on the screen here, we have some pieces that are special to our collection. If you came in on the first floor, which I'm pretty sure everyone did, you saw our bears. These are obviously taxidermied polar bears. They're kind of a staff favorite. Well, they're a staff favorite for most of collections. I don't know about the rest of the museum. We have Beethoven and Schubert. I'll let you read about their history downstairs. If you pick up a community paper on your way in or out, Kara, our registrar, recently wrote an article about these two. There's a total of 4. We're actually on the hunt for the other 2. So if you happen to know where they are or someone who knows where they are, let us know. We would love to have them so we can complete the set. We have highwaymen, which are on display on this floor next to Figurehead. This is just an example of one of the highwaymen that we have in our collection. We actually have a piece of the Senator, which was a massive tree in Seminole that a lady accidentally lit on fire, and it was destroyed. We were given a piece of it to preserve. And then a small sampling from our archives, since Lauren mentioned that we are working on kind of overhauling the Disney Gallery a little bit to make it more inclusive for other theme parks. This is a press packet from Circus World. I don't know if anyone here remembers Circus World. Yep, some people. It used to be right off of I-4 on 27 in Haines City. It's now a shopping center. It was Circus World and then Boardwalk and Baseball. When Circus World closed, some of you might know this, Michael Jackson absolutely loved one of the roller coasters, and so much so that when Circus World closed and Boardwalk and Baseball inevitably failed after being open for a year, he tried to buy the roller coaster to move to Neverland Ranch, and they said, absolutely not, you can't have it. Which I always thought was kind of a cool anecdote about it. But this is kind of what we do. We, like I said, we do the preservation, the care of everything. We work with exhibits very closely, we work with education very closely, and we really just try to make our collection as accessible as we possibly can. Obviously, there's some things that probably won't ever really see the light of day just because they're so fragile, but we're really trying to maintain Central Florida history and preserve it for future generations. And unlike Lauren, I'm going to call out the collections department, and I'm going to ask you all to stand up so you can see how many of this there actually are. We also have 2 techs who recently started who are helping us with our photo collection. Oh, come on, guys, seriously? With our fine, raise your hand. With our photo collection and our library, because we have a huge library. So we have I would say, a couple 100,000 artifacts between archives, actual artifacts, like tangible items, ephemera, digital, all of it. So this is minus maybe 2 people. This is the team that preserves all of that. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Katie so she can talk about how education plays into all of this.
All right, I'm back. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the Museum Education Department does and some of the community impact that not just education, the entire museum has. So that's us up there in our pink Barbie costumes from this past Halloween. We're adorable, and we're a lot of fun. So the blue vested people wrangling students around the building that I mentioned earlier, that's us in the education department. But school field trips are just a small part of what we do, an incredibly important part, but just one part of what we do in the education department. In the same way that the collections team curates the collection by determining what to collect and preserving those items, the education department curates experiences and learning opportunities for our guests. Can you guys hear me? Is the mic working? Yeah? A little louder? Okay. So the people coming through our door, just as general visitors, so those people who kind of come here on their own, purchase a ticket at the front desk, that's actually a small portion of the people we serve. That's only, in 2023, that was only about 1/3 of the people that we served. The other 2/3 are not entirely, not all, but mostly those are people that are engaged through experiences that are sort of organized and led through the education department. Now, I want to be clear, every single person in this building and across all departments contributes to those efforts, but the education department is sort of the organizer and the channel through which those programs happen. So how do we do this? By doing a lot of different stuff, that's how. So in 2023, our museum hosted 827 separate opportunities for public engagement outside of the people purchasing a ticket at the front desk. That is not just education, that also includes research requests, conducting oral histories, etc. But education is a big part of those. So those opportunities include school field trips, summer camps, scout workshops, family days, hosting speakers, community outreach, Century Sundays, lunch and learns, of course, and many more. So what we call our school services programs are school field trips, also group tours when, even if you're not coming from a school, if you come for a tour for whichever group you're a part of, and then our in-school outreach programs. Those are all part of school services. Last year we served about 10,000 K through 12 students. Field trips are an avenue through which we reach students who likely would not have an opportunity to visit the museum outside of their school trip, or maybe it is their first time ever visiting a museum when they come here for their school field trip. So we have tremendous community impact through our school field trips, and that's because we create a positive, lasting impression with the students when they come here. They have the opportunity to see history in a really fun and engaging way. So that helps shape not only their view of history, but also their view of museums and its role in their lives. We've actually had a few times where students would come on a school field trip, and then because of that, years later when they're a teenager in high school trying to get their community service hours, they will sorry. Nina is in the back making a face at me, and it just totally threw me off, so thanks for that, Nina. That's one of our staff in the education department. I told you that we were a fun bunch. Okay, where was I? So we've had a few times where students who came here on a field trip would contact us once they were in high school needing to do their community service hours. And so they would be a youth counselor in our summer camp program, and then from there they would reach out to us when they were in college, and they would be an intern with us. And so we really do see that not only are education programs shaping the future of museum visitors, shaping future museum visitors, but we're also potentially shaping the future of museum professionals as well. The notes that are in the middle of your table are actually some thank you notes from some of our recent field trips. They're absolutely heartwarming. If you have a chance before you leave, take a look through them. They're so cute. This one up here says, I can't really read it that well. It says, "Thank you for everything you gave us. The best was how you treated us with kindness." Absolutely heartwarming. And then we also, as I said, do outreach. We have 2 in-school programs, History on the Go and Museum in a Box. Not every student can make it here. For some schools, transportation, getting busing is a barrier to access. So we make sure that we can go to every school that is interested in having us in the Central Florida area with 2 separate programs. And then we also do community events, and we join our cultural partners at their events to share information about the museum, to share what we're doing, and to make sure that everybody, as many people as possible, are aware of the programs and resources that we provide. All right. Camps and youth programming. We host a 10-week summer camp program where we can serve up to 420 youths every year during their out-of-school time in the summer. This provides a fun and safe environment and enriching experiences that help prevent learning loss during out-of-school times. We also host homeschool programs and scouts to try and offer programming for all different types of youth learners. And we like to provide opportunities for non-school-based youth engagement or homeschool and non-traditional classroom models. Next, we have public programming. We offer a lot of different kinds of public programming. So in addition to Lunch and Learn, the first Saturday of every month, we host History Alive, where our visitors to the museum can engage in guided tours, seeing collections, highlights from our collection, themed activities throughout the building, etc. We also offer, we have an initiative right now called Honoring Central Florida's Diverse Heritage Arts and Culture, which is a public programming initiative where we partner with local heritage and cultural organizations to invite artists, dancers, speakers to celebrations that highlight some of the diverse communities and cultures that call Central Florida home and that shape our history. We also, of course, have scholars and speakers, the Sensory Sundays that I already mentioned, and numerous other programs that we offer to the public. And then finally, also housed in the education department is our volunteer program. So volunteers are owed a massive amount of credit for the success of the work of our museum. At any given time, we have approximately 150 volunteers, 150 active volunteers, both youths and adults, who fulfill a variety of essential roles in the museum. So docents lead field trips and group tours. Public programming facilitators provide engaging experiences for event guests. Youth volunteers help us maintain a safe and engaging camp environment. Collections volunteers help with the important work of digitizing and cataloging parts of our collection. And exhibit volunteers help with the creation and upkeep of our exhibitions. In 2023, museum volunteers collectively completed an astonishing 8,043 hours of service here at the History Center. So why is all this important? Not just the education programming, but everything we do here at the History Center. Community impact and access. So we remove barriers to access by providing opportunities to engage for all members of our community. So I mentioned our Sensory Sunday programs earlier that are intended for individuals on the autism spectrum who have other neurodivergent conditions. They're also great for early learners, for little ones. We provide programming for non-traditional learning models, and we provide a lot of free and reduced admission. So last year, over 5,000 students attended a school field trip here for free. We granted 42 camp scholarships, totaling over $10,000 in value. And we offered over 2,500 guests, general admission guests, either free or reduced admission. We also offer diverse programming because we recognize that our museum should reflect the community in which it exists. So we make sure that we do that, and to do that, we do it through our collaborations, through our exhibitions, through our collecting initiatives, and then also through our museum education programming. Public programming is one of the most adaptable ways to provide diverse experiences for our audiences. And so that is why we offer a variety of different field trip themes, so students can learn about Black history, they can learn about Native American history. Our homeschool program regularly celebrates different kinds of people and different individuals. For example, for March, we're doing women's history for our homeschool programming. We're also doing a women's history breakfast for adults. As I mentioned earlier, are honoring Central Florida's Diverse Heritage, Arts, and Culture initiative as well in public programming. So it really is at the heart of everything we do, and it's a key aspect of the stuff that we develop here at the History Center. And then as a final note, I do need to mention, today you heard from our 3 curatorial departments. We're sort of the content drivers of our museum. But I do have to also mention the administrative teams who are not presenting today, but they are absolutely essential to the work that we do here. That includes philanthropy, finance, marketing, guest services, and private rentals. So these folks support everything we do. Making sure that we have the funds needed to operate and that the business is running, promoting the work we do in our community, and making sure you all know what resources and opportunities are available, and ensuring that you have a great experience when you walk through the door, making sure that you're in a clean, safe environment, all of those kinds of things. And then, of course, I can't fail to mention that we also have a volunteer board that helps guide and helps us steer the ship as well. So that in a nutshell is the History Center. That's like a crash course, 1 hour in the entire history of our organization and what we do. Yeah, I think I pause here for questions, right? Does anybody have any questions for any of us that presented today? In the back, yes, Ms. Margot?
No big question.
Yes.
I remember the grand opening, September 29. My bank, SunTrust, which is Truist now, was the sponsor, and they encouraged us to come. We had the bank on the South Orange, so to come and become a member, which I did. I remember the former director of the History Center, Mike Perkins. He has this table right in front of the main entrance. I don't remember what I signed. I must have signed something. I don't remember whether I paid anything. But yes, I have been a member since 2000. Yes, it is just a great experience. And I did some voluntary work in 2004 after I retired from the bank, but it was too cold here. I was freezing.
You've been with us a long time and a long-time supporter as well. We appreciate that. Anybody else? Let's do it.
So, we have one question asking how many jail cells were on the 5th floor, and was there any sort of recreation room on that floor?
We'll take this off and just pass it around.
I'd have to look at the blueprints. I don't actually know the number of jail cells on the floor. You said the other was recreation?
Yes.
As far as I know, there wasn't. Once it expanded into the annex, I know they had a state-of-the-art kitchen that the inmates could cook in, but it doesn't, from what I've researched, it doesn't seem like it. I don't know, does anyone else in collections?
Well, it wasn't a prison, it was a jail, so
Yeah.
that kind of factors in a little bit in terms of like how long a person would be there. So I wouldn't think of it in terms of like a maximum security prison situation, I guess.
Awesome.
Yeah. Any other questions?
We have another online question. So someone is asking how diverse is our staff and our board, and they're wondering if that has any impact on the work that we do at our museum.
We can fully acknowledge that the museum field as a whole can do better work in being diverse. We are the same. We do certainly have some diverse individuals on our staff, both in terms of ethnicity and in terms of LGBTQ plus status, et cetera. But we do have work to do, certainly, as I think most of the museum field would agree. They have work to do. So if you have people that you know interested in applying for our jobs, please send them our way. I think that is why community collaborations are a key aspect, because it is important to us that our community can tell their own story and that we're not a voice from above. And so in everything we do, because we do recognize that our staff could be more diverse than it is currently, we work with community partners. And again, if you ever see a position open and you are interested, please feel free to apply.
One more question from online, asking to give a couple examples of what kind of films we have in our collection.
I would probably recommend, I don't know that people know that like off the top of their head, and so I would recommend that you find the contact information online at thehistorycenter.org and just reach out to our collections team directly. Thank you, we appreciate it.